This is beautiful North Africa. And this is the rather attractive new Audi RS5 Avant, the latest car in a much-loved bloodline that began over 30 years ago with the RS2. But as a V6 plug-in hybrid, this doesn't only come with the weight of history on its shoulders.
Because this weighs 5,225 pounds or 2,370 kilos. There is of course a reason for that, because batteries are heavy. The question is, has it been worth it? Has becoming a plug-in hybrid been detrimental, as unfortunately it was with the C63 AMG, or is it more akin to the Bentley Continental GT, which was a transformation thanks to being a hybrid?
This perhaps gives a small, smoky clue as to the answer.
I think we've destroyed a rear tyre.
This episode is driven by Hagerty, who, in case you don't know, provide car insurance that's designed by drivers for drivers. So if you have a special car that you don't drive every day, like one of these perhaps, then take a trip to hagerty.com/Henry. Or pick up the phone, give them a call, and speak to a like-minded enthusiast about a quote.
Now you might be wondering why we're driving the RS5 in Morocco, and the easy answer to that is that, well, that's where Audi decided to launch it. But as you'll see, there are some amazing roads out here, and I suppose if you want to draw sort of automotive and geographical kind of likenesses, in some ways I've always thought that Morocco is a bit of a hybrid country. It sort of bridges Europe and Africa in many ways. It also has such variety within its bounds because it flows from the Mediterranean down over the Atlas Mountains to the Sahara. So you've got this massive breadth of character, I suppose, which is what they're going for in this.
Tenuous links aside, Morocco does feel like quite a brave choice as a launch location for the broad-arched new RS5 because it's often a bit of a squeeze. And
it's not without its bumps and potholes. So it's a pretty good test for the suspension of this, and actually whether it is a good everyday proposition. So far, it is. It's very easy to live with. It doesn't feel like one of those cars that instantly wants to beat you up or sort of impose its sportiness on you. These seats, for example. If you're not a fan of the BMW M1s that are kind of definitely much more sporty than these, just a little more relaxed, a bit more everyday perhaps.
And talking of the everyday, the 25.9 kilowatt hour battery, chargeable either on the go with the V6 or at home in 2.5 hours at 11 kilowatts, gives the new RS5 an EV range of 54 miles.
Which is actually pretty useful. It's not just token that at all. You could easily do, I don't know, the school run in the morning and then again in the afternoon. That would be fine. A trip to work and back on EV range only if that's what you wanted to do. The other thing I quite like is the boost button here. Now, I've not been necessarily a fan of those in the past because they just seem to make the car overly aggressive and sort of unnecessary for a lot of overtakes and that sort of thing. But in this, because you can go from full EV mode and then press boost button, and for 10 seconds you get all that overtaking power, it really does change the character of the car massively and actually seems useful for once. Obviously, like some other things in this, the fact that it's a V6 hybrid for a start, it links to F1, and Audi is back in F1, so we were bound to see some sort of nods to that, I suppose.
Now, one of the more common sights on the roads of Morocco is vehicles stretched to and often far beyond their manufacturer-intended load-carrying capabilities, which might be something RS5 owners are forced into.
You see, although the RS5 Avant is clearly still a fairly practical performance car with 361 litres or 12.7 cubic feet, it is nonetheless slightly less practical than the old RS4 Avant or even an A5 Avant without all the hybrid stuff it's only got about 3/4 of the capacity. Obviously that goes down proportionally when you put the seats down, but nonetheless, a little less load carrying ability.
This seems like a good time to mention that if you tend to travel light, then there is a saloon version of the RS5 as well, a nod to the popularity of the B7 RS4 saloon apparently. And much as I'm a fan of the wagon aesthetic, the saloon does look really rather good. They both look the same from the driver's seat, of course.
Overall, the interior of the new RS5 is a very nice place to be, as Audis so often are, but it sort of seems to sometimes give with one hand and take away with the other. Screens, for example. So we've got big screens still there, but on the plus side, the buttons we have got are the ones you, I think, actually want to use most of the time. Things like drive select, obviously just volume control, and obviously turning off the ADAS systems and things like that. And there's this little lip down here which just makes it easier to access the buttons without it sort of feeling like it's moving around. So at least with the screens, it feels like they have thought about them a bit. Also, on the subject of the screens, I like the fact that the shape isn't just a rectangle with 90-degree corners like that, like some sort of television screen plonked there. It's been thought about. It meshes nicely with this screen over here from this angle. The only problem with that is that within this, there are obviously rectangular screens, so an 11.9-inch one here for the dash and a 14.5-inch one here for the rest of the information, and they don't fill the frame, so it feels a bit like a watch movement that doesn't fit in the case. Sylvain Berneron would not approve. Steering wheel. This is obviously not the car I've been driving all day because I wanted to show you the fact you can get it with an Alcantara, or Dinamica as they call it, covering on this, which I think is really nice. I would always choose that, and you get other little bits of it down here as well. However, there are some other material choices I'm not so keen on. There's lots of piano black, which obviously picks up dust very quickly. I love these little buttons for Boost and RS. They feel very premium, but next to them, these plastic panels here, not very nice. However, one last little bit, which I do like, it seems completely unnecessary and therefore rather wonderful, is this panel in here, which has these sort of three-dimensional diamonds in there. It feels fantastic, and it sort of blends in and out, and it's sort of sculptural, almost artistic, and as I say, very unnecessary and therefore rather wonderful.
Not that you spend much time looking at the interior when there is scenery like this.
Just so beautiful here. There's something quite strange about it. It's nearly 30 degrees down here, but you can see the snowy Atlas Mountains up there. They're just everywhere, just frame everything. I also love the fact that on these roads, a lot of the time they've painted the curbs in sort of stripes, so it's a red and white or green and white sometimes. So it makes it feel like you're on the, I don't know, route of the Targa Florio or something like that. When you do wake up the 2.9 litre V6, 503 brake horsepower on its own, which is 59 brake horsepower up on the old RS4. Torque, just from the V6, is actually identical, so 442 pounds-feet. But obviously, we have the electric motor to add into the mix.
While on the radial flux is 175 brake horsepower and 339 pounds-feet of torque, and you have combined total outputs of 630 bhp and 603 pounds-feet of torque. Of course, there's the added weight to somewhat negate that uplift, but the extra low-down electrified torque does help it get off the line more quickly and drop the 0 to 62 time by 0.3 to 3.6 seconds.
Something that's not great, however, is the sound. Despite those massive exhaust pipes, I just don't feel like there's really much of an engaging soundtrack at all in this, which is a shame.
The transmission might initially look a little uninspiring too.
The fact it's a torque converter gearbox, I suppose, adds to the usability perhaps, but definitely, as ever, it doesn't give the snappiest feeling shifts, and allied to these paddles, which seem to be a throwback in terms of audio and just seem to be persevering with it. They're still not my favourite, they're just sort of quite small, little ears behind the spokes there. At least they're metal.
However, it's the new quattro system downstream of the gearbox that's fascinating and really defines much of the character of this RS5. For a start, the torsion centre diff now remains at least partially locked at all times, helping turn in amongst other things. Then there is the new electromechanical torque vectoring system on the rear axle, which uses its own separate 10 horsepower 30 pound-foot electric motor to distribute torque very powerfully and precisely in either direction in just 15 milliseconds, on throttle, off throttle and under braking.
And the thing about it is that they couldn't have done this without the 400 volt architecture, because it needs that for the electric motor that's on that rear differential, which has been developed with magnet. It's the first application in any road car, and it really is mighty impressive. However, much as you can feel this new rear diff on the road, and you certainly can, what we really need to show its full breadth of capability is a track.
And as it turns out, a different colour RS5. It's actually mechanically identical, but there are a couple of cosmetic spec changes which I'll just point out first.
Most noticeable are the carbon fibre parts here, so forged carbon fibre, which you've seen before, but it's quite sort of thick pieces that have been chopped up, and Audi calls it carbon camouflage, which they then made into a sort of portmanteau of carboflage. And see it there, and also on the mirrors here. Also, down here, got some rather nice bronze brake calipers for the big carbon ceramic discs, 440 millimeters in diameter at the front. Also, the bi-colour wheels are an option on this. Tyres then 285/30/21s all round, because obviously it's quattro, and we've got P0Rs on this and the car we're driving, but there is a Bridgestone option as well for sort of, I suppose, broader range of conditions.
Time to give those tyres some work to do.
This is about torque rear, which you're only meant to use on a racetrack, and to be honest, I want a bit of space to be able to try it properly. So drive select and then press this one up here, confirm that yes, we're doing it in some way that is safe and all that. So torque rear, it's all about that rear differential. So it's not doing anything to the centre diff, because that is passive.
The steering ratio is also just 13:1, which helps make easy work of the slalom, which leads to
well, that is definitely oversteer. That's pretty interesting. So you've got to stay on the throttle, let it do its thing, and I think you need to trust it more than I probably did just then. So let's give that another go. Yeah, that's a lot of smoke, but a lot of drifting. Very much a four-wheel drive drift. So you really want to be kind of concentrating on the steering perhaps, keep it nailed on the throttle, and that amazing rear differential will do all the work for you. So that's not what you expect from an Audi RS.
However, it's not a gentle process, and after just 3 runs,
that's a rear tyre gone. Not usually a heavy-footed sort of person, but
the engineers actually seem more delighted than surprised or concerned, and thankfully you really don't have to do donuts to feel the balance and benefit of the new diffs.
Generally on the road, you've got the balance, dynamic and comfort settings, which are sort of everyday ones. If you do find yourself on a good piece of road like this, then I recommend putting in an RS Sport or RS Individual, depending how you want the dampers, but just straight into RS Sport works really well. It is remarkable how well this turns in, and instantly how you feel like you can engage the rear end. They're quite a polished surface on the road, so that's always going to make the car feel like it's perhaps moving around more, but there's certainly less of that sort of nose-led feel that you expect from an Audi. And yes, they've been getting better over the years, but it feels like a proper leap on in terms of the handling balance for an RS Audi.
The twin valve dampers that adjust for both compression and rebound deserve real praise too. with a ride that feels like it's taken inspiration from the very polished RS4 competition.
This is capable of stopping faster than the old RS4, despite having that much more weight. It's brake by wire, but you get this sort of nice firm pedal feel, don't get the sense of lots going on, and again that just massively adds to the sense that this doesn't weigh as much as you know it does on paper. Get it onto a good piece of road like this and I genuinely don't think you feel the extra weight. You know it's all there, but a bit like the Lamborghini Revuelto, which was so much heavier than the Aventador but felt lighter, I think it's kind of the same with this.
It is hard to look past the curb weight, and I'm sure a lighter non-hybrid M3 would show up with RS5 dynamically, but it did the old RS4 too. And the new RS5's extra mass and the money you pay for it has at least brought something interesting and I think worthwhile to both the practicality and the performance aspects that have been equally crucial to this formula ever since the RS2.
It's often said that a camel is just a horse designed by committee, and I don't think that's being particularly kind to the camels, because it's just saying it's a bit of a mess. There's a lot going on, and that could have been the case with this, because there's a lot going on with this. But this, well, it's very definitely not a camel.
Oh, and because this is an Audi, there is one way in which you can say it puts on a light show.